Good afternoon, everybody. I'm dropping things here. It's the panic. We are ready to start our event. My name is David Kangue. I'm the Chief Operating Officer in the university. Today I'm doubling up as the Program Director. So we are very happy to be here, and I particularly am very happy to be facilitating this very venerable event. Allow me to greet everybody according to their ranks, associations. Let me start off with the family of Sol Plaatje, the Sol Plaatje Educational Trust, our Chancellor, Justice Steven Majiedt, Chairperson of Council, Professor Randall Carolison, members of Council, our very own DVC Research, Acting Vice Chancellor and Vice Chancellor Designate Professor Deborah Meyer. I hope I captured all your titles. Members of the university's executive management team, members of the senior management team, including our deans who are heading our faculties, members of the management forum, I've seen a lot of you here, members of the SRC, both past and incoming, we recognize you, and our very important clients at whose behest we serve, the students, members of the community, every one of you from the four corners of our province and our city. The William Prescott alumni, a special recognition to you because you have produced this wonderful judge of ours. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Good afternoon again. It is an honor, indeed, as I've said before, to really facilitate and to direct this program at this year's Sol Plaatje Annual Lecture, an occasion that continues to honor the remarkable legacy of one of South Africa's most extraordinary sons, Solomon Tekisho Plaatje. As we all know, Sol Plaatje was a man of many gifts. He was a writer, translator, journalist, political activist, tireless advocate for social justice, a bridge builder between worlds, and a believer in the power of education and dialogue. This afternoon, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Judge Steven Majiedt, whose own distinguished career in the judiciary echoes many of the principles that Sol Plaatje held dear: justice, equality, intellectual rigor, and an unwavering commitment to the Constitution and the rule of law. Through his chosen topic for this lecture, lessons learned during my career as a judge from the life and legacy of the Venerable Sol Plaatje, Judge Majiedt will be exploring the intersections between his own judicial journey and the life and work of Sol Plaatje. Through this lens, we will consider how the struggle and triumphs of the past continue to illuminate the path forward, and how the pursuit of justice remains both personal, a personal calling or a vocation, and a collective responsibility. I invite you to listen very deeply, very reflectively, and to engage with the ideas that he will put forward. But first things first, allow me to call upon the acting VC, Professor Deborah Meyer, to come and give us an official welcome. Professor Meyer, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Goeienaand. Dumela? Molweni. Okay, I don't know that you don't greet like South Africans. I think it's maybe late afternoon on a Friday, so not the most energy. But I know our judge and his presentation will wake everyone up. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are very, very grateful for the fact that you would make time to spend this afternoon with us. Our facilitator and our master of ceremonies observed protocol. So I will just add to that and say all protocol observed. I do, however, want to say special welcome to Judge Majiedt and his wife, Rowena. I feel they are my people. And it'll become clear when they speak, when the judge speaks a little bit later on. I also want to welcome our council, members of council. They pay me. It's not a good idea to not welcome your boss. Very special welcome to a former Vice-Chancellor, first inaugural Vice-Chancellor, Prof. Balim. Prof. Balim also, my people, my backup. Prof. Balim and I grew up in Kliptown. We have Kliptown in common. So I have to mention that these are credentials that you have to keep in mind. We don't forget where we come from. I also want to say a special welcome to the family of Judge Majiedt, by extension also my family. Happy birthday to the little brother, welcome. And I'm so grateful that you would volunteer for a lecture as a birthday gift. That's the kind of family we need. All the staff members from Sol Plaatje, all our students, community members, special welcome to Tati and his wife, the Mogoro family representation here today, welcome. And as always, your support of our university is very much appreciated. Our deans, because I am their boss, they had to be here today. Special welcome then to them, and also to my backup, Professor Green, the DVC Teaching and Learning, and our registrar. I announced that they are my backup colleagues, just in case there is a need for an easy and quick retreat. They know where to position themselves. Welcome, and thank you all for being here. I am very sure you will enjoy what we have for you tonight. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 Annual Sol Plaatje Lecture. And we consider this as one of the flagship intellectual and cultural events on our university's calendar, and indeed, one of the most meaningful gatherings in the Northern Cape's academic and civic life. Each year, this lecture provides us with an opportunity to pause, reflect, and draw lessons from the life, work, and enduring legacy of Solomon Tshekisa Plaatje. As you know, he has a number of hats he was wearing very, very aptly: a teacher, interpreter, journalist, linguist, political thinker, a writer, and above all, a courageous champion for justice and equality. Sol Plaatje's legacy reminds us that intellect and integrity are not bound by circumstance. His writings, his activism, and his leadership demonstrated how one individual, armed with moral clarity, education, and compassion, can shape the conscience of a nation. Our university bears his name, not by coincidence, but to honor his legacy through our scholarship and community engagement and our pursuit of truth. This year's theme, Lessons Learned During My Career as a Judge from the Life and Legacy of the Venerable Sol Plaatje, challenges us to reflect on the intersections between law and justice, and will be delivered by someone aptly qualified for such reflections. Justice Steven Majiedt, our esteemed Chancellor, Constitutional Court Justice, and son of the Northern Cape, has spent decades at the heart of South Africa's evolving democracy. From the courtrooms of Kimberley to the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg, his jurisprudence has consistently reflected empathy, fairness, and a deep respect for human dignity, the same values that emanated from Sol Plaatje's life and work. Justice Majiett's address today carries special resonance as it marks his final lecture in his capacity as Chancellor of the university. His guidance, wisdom, and unwavering belief in the transformative power of education have left an indelible mark on our institution. Through his leadership, he has reminded us that universities are not merely places of learning, but instruments of justice, places where knowledge must meet conscience, and where young minds must be nurtured to serve not only themselves, but the broader society. As we gather here this evening, scholars, students, community members, and friends, we do more than commemorate Saul Plaatje's birthday or honor his name. We recommit ourselves to his vision of a South Africa that values language and literature, equity and empathy, law and liberty. May this lecture renew in all of us a sense of moral purpose and courage to write, to speak, and to act in the spirit of Saul Plaatje and to continue the work of justice in our own time. Justice Majiedt, we are deeply honored to have you deliver this year's lecture, and we thank you not only for your distinguished service to the judiciary, but also to our university. We also thank you for embodying in word and deed the very ideals that inspired Saul Plaatje himself. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to officially welcome all of you to the 2025 annual Saul Plaatje lecture. I encourage you to listen, to hear, and to act on the information that will be shared with you today. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for the very warm welcome, Professor Meyer. Everything has got a beginning. I know the physicists will tell me the world does not have a beginning, but there was a big bang. So everything starts somewhere. This is applicable to this lecture as well. It started somewhere. And it is only right for us to allow someone with the caliber of Professor Mataga to come and give us an account of the beginnings of this lecture. Professor Mataga, over to you.
Thank you so much, MC. Please allow me, like my boss, to say protocol observed. Tonight, I just want to do 3 things, if you allow me, in the 15 minutes that the MC gave me. The first is to provoke. The second is to, of course, as I've been given to do, give a short historical and institutional context of this gathering today. And lastly, to pay homage to 2 luminaries, Saul Plaatje himself and today's presenter, Justice Steven Majiedt. The provocation, this comes from kind of my personal inclinations. As I grow older and I get fascinated by the agency of ancestors. And as I grow older, perhaps shrugging off my Judeo-Christian confounding of African ancestors as evil or pagan, and realize that I myself will soon be one myself, for one has to die to be demarcated one. I slowly realize the value of my afterlife, almost conscious of what it should be or would be after I've left this life. But in this reflection, I am keenly conscious to the fact that I have a string of ancestors whose agency in my lives, and perhaps in your own life, most of whom have been strong intellectually, with very embedded and well-developed knowledge traditions. Men, women, who against all odds fought against systems of oppression to make their voices heard. We celebrate one such ancestor today through what I would call a living descendant. I didn't want to call Judge Majiedt an ancestor, yes, but through one of his living descendant, Judge Majiedt. I'm just gonna, in the next few minutes, give you some historical context of this lecture. And in doing this, I want to thank my colleague in absentia, Sabata Mokai, who's away on sick leave, but also the communications office for helping me to put this up. Memorial lectures are public addresses given posthumously, usually to commemorate lives, achievements, and ongoing influence of persons who made significant contributions to a specific field, community, or cause. The annual Saul Plaatje lecture is a flagship event at this university, which is a highlight of what we now call the annual Soul Plaatje Memorial Weekend, which is a collection, a well-curated collection of events that aim to celebrate not just this luminary, but also our growth as an institution. This lecture series, however, originated in the pre-1994 era at the University of Botswana, currently Northwest University, under the auspices of Professor Bob Leshwai, and speakers then included well-acclaimed writers like Eskia Mpelele, Stephen Gray, and Jabulo Ndebele, and many other literary and academic trendsetters. Around 2009, though, the Northern Cape Department of Arts, Sports and Culture, and I see some of my colleagues from this important partner institution, revived this series, and the first speaker of this resuscitated series was the former Deputy President of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe. The following year, the lecture returned to Mahikeng, where it was co-hosted by Northwest University and the Northwest Provincial Department of Sports, Arts and Culture. The invited speakers included Sipho Sepe, Ketumile Kwitmasire of Botswana, Hlonipani Mokoena, and distinguished scholars like Mushe Nkondo, Brian Whelan, Jean-Jacques Sene, and Bangole Otomoso from Nigeria. The lecture was also previously held in the Free State Province, organized by the Vrystaat Arts Festival and Soul Plaatje University, which was honored to carry the name of this pioneering journalist, writer, linguist, and politicians, eventually became the home of the lecture series soon after we were established. Now, the lecture forms part of this weekend, as I said, a time when we sit and reflect and celebrate and reaffirm where we come from, perhaps our ancestors, and reestablishing our own identity as an institution, as a people, as writers, as researchers, as humanity. This university takes pride in memorializing this academic giant, not just in our naming, but in events such as this. This life and legacy of our namesake is not confined to history books. It lives through the spirit, the purpose, and the people of our institution. Each year, we remind ourselves that we are a living continuation of Solomon Plaatje's vision for education, justice, social progress. If I had the powers, Prof, I would make Soul Plaatje's native life a replacement to my students' national identity card. But I don't have those powers. His writing from the heart of his people, always insightful, but influenced by where he came from, but quite cosmopolitan in outlook and quite future-oriented. We still read fantastic writing from Soul Plaatje today, and we take pride in teaching our students and the future generations of these achievements. Just to inform you that SPU academics have done quite substantial work in intellectualizing the work of Soul Plaatje. In this regards, again, I pay homage to my brother and fellow academic who I've worked with for almost a decade, Sabata Mokai, and also his erstwhile collaborator in absentia again, Brian Whelan, who is an esteemed historian, a collaborator and a dear friend of this institution. Among many, there are many other people who have intellectualized the work of Soul Plaatje: Janet Remington, Bekisizwe Peterson, Sekepe Machela, and many others who have contributed to this. I've personally enjoyed how Soul Plaatje, the intellectual, the writer, the activist, and politician perhaps, thinker, and how some of these authors have particularly humanized him. In this, I mean making Soul Plaatje ordinary. An ordinary man born in Potisetloho. God, I hope I got that right. Durfontein near Boshoff. A father, a family man, perhaps a lover, along with his dear wife, Mom Elizabeth Lily Niimbele. Now, as I go towards sitting down, I think my 15 minutes almost up, a bit about the trajectory of this lecture at Plaatje University. Around 2019, we invited Professor Benny Pihlana, who presented on Plaatje's works and reflected on the implications on higher education in South Africa in the 21st century. This was followed by Justice Edward Cameron, who gave an overview of the Constitution, also drawing from the archive of Plaatje. In 2021, a fellow academic from UNISA, Professor Sekepe Machile, talked about Plaatje's role in constructing a body of knowledge about Botswana culture. This was held in hybrid format due to COVID. In 2022, Professor William Gumede from Wits came and provoked us about Plaatje and the notion of intellectual imagination. I remember that lecture quite well and the kind of ideas that he was throwing around for us to rethink ourselves as a society, drawing from Plaatje. In 2024, Justice Albie Sachs came, I remember sitting here, and he talked, his capturing of his lecture was quite interesting. He said, "Is this the country I was fighting for?" All of us who sat in that lecture were marveled at the kind of provocations that came from his reflection. I should say, sadly, two of the past presenters have since departed, and I did include in the present table, Professor Kole Otomosho from Nigeria, and Professor Karen Haire, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, who was a fellow academic at SPU, who sadly passed away a few years ago due to cancer. We pay homage to these departed academics. In 2025, today, we boldly, yes, claim Justice Steven Majiedt as he joined this collective of highly esteemed individuals to continue to challenge us and to continue to provoke us on the many aspects of our lives. And lastly, as I sit down, I would like to thank and acknowledge a living descendant of the ancestor, Justice Steven Majiedt. For some of us who have grown with this institution, we have seen the passion, we have emulated the leadership, we have gleaned quietly the wisdom that comes with the likes of Judge Majiedt. And tonight, I want to welcome you to this reflection and wish you enjoy the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mataga. We have indeed learned. In any culture, or let me say every culture, when the chief is about to speak, there is always a praise singer that precedes the chief. We have our own praise singer today, Dr. Jody Sidras, who is going to pave the way for Judge Majiedt. Registrar, please come forward.
Halala. Goedemiddag. Good afternoon. Dumelang. Molweni. Awe. Thank you, Program Director. And as the previous speaker said, all protocols observed. Friends, family, colleagues, Justice Steven Majiedt, Stephen Arnold Majiedt, is a child of the Northern Cape. He was born in Kennard, and he was schooled in Berkeley West, just outside of Kimberley. The Justice will tell you that Berkeley West is, in fact, the real capital of the Northern Cape, and not Kimberley. He matriculated from William Prescott High School in 1978, where he was the head prefect. He is the holder of both the BA Law and LLB degrees from UWC. After his stint in the Western Cape, he returned to the Northern Cape between 1994 and 2010. But before then, you should know up to 1994, and in those turbulent years of the 80s, he worked in the same chambers with people like our previous minister or former Minister of Justice, who is since deceased, Dalla Oma, as well as Judge Siraj's Desire. You can call them the Cape Triumvirate, not in terms of Brutus and those guys, okay? The Groot Geeste. Between 94 and 2010, when Justice Majiedt returned to plow back to the Northern Cape and to the people of the Northern Cape, he was heading up the elections in 1994, and he also became the Provincial State Law Advisor, the Chief Provincial State Law Advisor to the Northern Cape Provincial Government in 1997. He held this post until 1999. He went briefly back into private practice, not leaving the Northern Cape though. In March 2000, he was appointed as an acting judge in the Northern Cape High Court. And I must say, Justice, we are still trying to get that building, to add it to our portfolio. And hopefully we can start our own faculty of law there in years to come. In 2010, that's when Justice Majiedt left the Northern Cape to take up a higher position as Supreme Court judge, but not too far, down in Bloemfontein, hour-and-a-half drive for those who are not familiar with that road. He acted as a Constitutional Court Justice between February and May 2014 until the point when he was permanently appointed in 2019 by President Cyril Ramaphosa. What you won't read in the bio that's there is that the Justice was also a visiting researcher at the Bonavero Institute of Human Rights at Oxford University. He is passionate and passionately involved with the Art and Justice Project of the Constitutional Court as an advocate there for that. And you would note that he is an honorary professor at UWC, but in deference to policy, he prefers not to use that title. So, just for on a personal note, I have learned so much from Justice Majiedt. One of them was that we refer to the jurist of the Constitutional Court as Justice, and they are entitled as the only ones to use that title as opposed to judge. The rest of the judiciary below the Constitutional Court are referred to as judges. But the other thing that I have learned from the Justice, those timeless virtues, and the obvious one is justice, that he exemplifies wisdom, courage, and temperance or moderation. With those words, Justice Majiedt, it is our pleasure to welcome you and deliver the 2025 Solomon, now I'm getting Chancellor, Plaatje, I'm getting very emotional now, Justice. It's going to be the last time in an official position or role that you are here. But we have really enjoyed working with you. And I'm sure that in your new capacity as the founding, the inaugural, the first Chancellor of this university, our paths will still continue to grow. Halala, Justice Majiedt.
Thank you and good evening. Where's my wife, Rowena? I'll just make a note. Jody must do the eulogy at my funeral. All protocols observed, but I must greet the acting VC, Professor Deborah Meyer, who's become a very good friend. I must greet the DVC, Professor Green. I must greet Dr. Cedras, Dr. Kangue, Professor Matahe, the Dean of the faculties here, and all staff and students. And so many of my friends who are here from far, I really appreciate it, and local. The one thing about Kimberley is they say you cry when you get here, but when you leave, you cry again even more. Because you can't get the place out of your system, and we really love this place, particularly our people. That's where we keep coming back. And my brother there, who's become my brother, Tati Mokoro, thank you, and Kelo, his wife, welcome. My own brothers here, my blood brothers, they are William, we call him Vernie for short, he's sitting over there, Donovan, and Brynma, whose birthday it is today. I'm very pleased that they are here. Thank you very much. Last but not least, my lovely wife is here, and her brother Granwell, and our only child, our daughter, Corin Mandy Anderson, Majiedt. And I haven't greeted, and I saw the only greeting that got some response was aware, so let me say, aware, Masekenners! You can see when I was an advocate in Cape Town, I used to defend a lot of these Cape Town gangsters. When we were just married a few years, a year or two in Cape Town, a friend of ours said when we had only the one child for a number of years and still have only the one child, he said, "Yet een kind soos 'n treinlig." In English it means you've got one child like a train light. And I said, that's fine, we love that little train light. It really is an honor to be here, and I mean that sincerely. You know, the place grows on you. As it has grown, Sol Plaatje University has grown on me. And I regard all of you as family, the students, present and former members of the SRC staff that I worked very closely with. The former VC, how can I forget him, Eunice Ballum, has also become a good friend. You know, his speciality is cement. Cement, the structure of cement. And the cement he laid here is unbreakable, it's unmovable. So this university can't go wrong with a man like Eunice Ballum as the inaugural Vice-Chancellor. And in absence, my dear friend and former schoolmate, Andrew Crouch, who is indisposed, who can't be here, I want to acknowledge also as the second VC, and then the VC designate. I think we've done extremely well at this small university to establish a formidable place. I prepared this lecture, and then I wrote a long thing about Sol Plaatje's history, and then the booklet, I saw the booklet, and I also heard what Professor Mataha has said before me and others before me. So I won't go into the detail of Sol Plaatje, but I must say this. And by the way, I chose the theme myself because I thought I should speak about what the life of a man like this means in South Africa today. And we all know where South Africa is today. We're in a bad place, and yet, as the Bible often says, we are bent, but not broken. I don't believe as a South African society we'll ever be broken. Maybe I'm unrealistic, but I'm an eternal optimist. We'll get bent, yes, we'll get battered, but we'll never get broken and beaten. And so Sol Plaatje to me is a giant South African patriot. He's a selfless servant of the people, a truly gifted writer, a linguist, a philosopher, most of all, a liberation hero. And unfortunately, he's less well known than many of our South African liberation stalwarts. It's only last 10 or 20, maybe more years that he's come into his own right as a liberation stalwart and as a literary pioneer. He's a person, and that to me is the most important character trait of Sol Plaatje. He always put his country first above personal ambition. And I'll demonstrate now why I say so. You've heard about his history. And you'll read about it in the booklet. But you'll see that this man is a man who lived his life practicing what he preached. He's a man who fervently believed in liberty and justice and equality. Now, what I intend doing this afternoon, just to explain the theme, is I'm going to speak about cases that I sat in, which all of them are difficult, but some of the cases that really challenged us. And I hope that when I do that, I'm going to give you a behind-the-scenes look into what do judges think when they decide these cases, so that you can understand how agonizing it is to make decisions when you're a judge. It'll also, I hope, explain the life philosophy of someone like Saul Plaatje, indirectly and sometimes directly, infusing your line of thinking when it comes to law and justice. Because the one thing that's true is that law and justice do not always meet. You may exercise your duties as a judge by applying the law, but are you dispensing justice? And if law and justice do not meet, then we have a serious problem. There's a dysfunctionality about it. Now, it does happen often that law and justice do not meet. May I also add on a personal level, as you've heard, I come from Barkly West. It's the unofficial, unproclaimed capital of the Northern Cape. We are still doing something about that. But Saul Plaatje grew up in a place that's not far from us, Pinel. It's, many people use a bicycle to travel from there to Barkly West from time to time. So I feel this special kinship with him, this remarkable South African. You've heard an overview of his life, but I want to add this, and it's in the booklet. His parents were Barolong people. Their actual surname wasn't Plaatje, it was Mogodi. But the farmer where they stayed in Boshoff just decided, farmer called Groenewald decided, from now on you're going to be called Plaatje, which means portrait, and that name stuck. They were adherents of the Berlin Lutheran Missionary Society, and he was a devout Christian. You know that he went to Mahikeng to become a court interpreter, and there he first started writing. He wrote The Siege of Mafeking, as it was then known. And that was during the Great War of 1899 and 1900. And what is important about that diary, which was only published much later in 1973, is that, as the critics say, it's one of the finest pieces of historical writing and a foretaste of a brilliant career to come, close quote. And it is rightly said by commentators that that writing, quote, has never had the acclaim and attention it deserves, close quote. And I agree with that. This is a very important piece of writing because it's a writing by a South African, a black South African, of the part played by the African population in Mahikeng during that siege, as well as by Saul Plaatje himself in what was long regarded as a white man's war. And so that marked the beginning of a remarkable literary career. I want to commend to you the reading of two of our fellow Saul Plaatje University colleagues, Sabata Mokai and Brian Willem, of whom you've heard from Professor Matahe. In 2023, exactly 50 years after the first publication of the diary, they edited a book for various writers about this diary, and it's called Revisiting Saul Plaatje's Mafeking Diary, Reconsideration and Restoration. We know he became a newspaper editor, and we know also that in 20 of the ANC. Now, the SANNC, he was a fiercely anti-tribalist man, and he was a staunch proponent of national unity. Now, this is an important aspect in life in South Africa today. He, of course, led the campaign against the lamentable Land Act 1913, which we are still trying to undo even now. And he was in the forefront of that struggle. He traveled for that purpose to the UK and to the US, met people like Marcus Garvey and William Du Bois, and he was drumming up support for this fight against this terrible Land Act of 1913. Now, we know that he wrote A Native Life in South Africa and Mahudi, an epic of South African life. What many people don't know is that he translated works of Shakespeare into Sesotho. He was a wonderful linguist, a giant of literature. But more importantly, he was in the forefront of the struggle for liberation. And just to show you why I call him a selfless servant of the people, when he was offered the leadership of the South African National Native Council, he turned it down because he wanted to put the people first and travel so that he could spread this message against this pernicious Land Act, because he knew what it was going to cause. It was going to cause great harm to the South African society, and yes, that is what it is today. So how do I sum up this remarkable man's life? We tasted freedom through the fight of Sol Plaatje and so many others. I would describe him thus. I would say that Sol Plaatje was the quintessential servant leader, not only in word, but in deed. Many people today call themselves servants of the people, but he lived it, he practiced it. So how does one infuse your own life and work with the values of this venerable man? If I would attempt to answer that question in relation to my own life and my own work, I would be biased and subjective, and the lawyers in the room and the magistrates like Chief Magistrate Creeling here and a colleague and other attorneys here will say that I'm a judge in my own cause. You can't judge your own case, so I won't say anything about that. You be the judges. But let me say this, I've always had a simple mantra in my life, and I try to live by 3 elementary principles: hard work, honesty, and humility, the 3 H's. Whether I've been able to achieve that is for you to judge, not for me. And I'm going to talk about life as a judge in general, particularly in the highest court in this country, the Constitutional Court. And then you form a judgment yourself once I've spoken about that. Let me state a self-evident truth. Being a judge in today's South Africa is tough, really tough, especially in the highest court of the land. Why? Because people expect judges, especially in the Constitutional Court, to sort out this country's problems. We can't. We can't write budgets. We can't rewrite budgets. We can't rewrite policies. We can't interfere with the work of the executive, of the president and his cabinet, or of the legislature. We can't interfere with the work of the premiers and the executive councils. And so expectations are high for judges to sort out South Africa's problems. We can't. Now, the work of the Constitutional Court is under tremendous pressure because of the workload. In 2013, the Constitution was amended. It was a Constitutional Court, pure and simple. But in 2013, the legislature added general jurisdiction to the court, so that we now do cases in all spheres of the law, not only constitutional law. And so we've become, in effect, a super appeal court. So you would appeal from the High Court to the appeal court in Bloemfontein, and then there's another appeal to us, the final appeal. So you can understand that the case numbers have increased tremendously. Quite simply put, everybody who loses in Bloemfontein comes to Braamfontein to the Constitutional Court. The lawyers tell them, you've got a case, let's go. Cost the clients money, but they won't tell them that. The problem in that court is that all the judges work together. So we sit together, we don't sit in panels. And so everybody must read all those applications for leave to appeal, and it's impossible. You can't have 11 or 10 or 9 or at least 8 judges read everything. And then after you've read all those papers, you realize, well, there's nothing to this case, and you have to dismiss it. So the cases that really demand our attention are the cases that we set down in court for hearing. The vast majority of cases, 90-odd%, we reject and we dismiss on the papers as we read them. But the cases that come to court for hearing are the cases where there's law involved, and we can't give enough attention to those cases, which are really the ones that we should be looking at. So what do we have here? We have a change in the rules of the game. The whole game has changed. It's like cricket. If you play 11-a-side full cricket, and you play 6-a-side or even rugby, much better known. 15-a-side rugby as opposed to 7s rugby. You change the rules of the game, but you don't change the players. So you expect 7 players to play 15-man rugby. It's as simple as that. And that is the problem that is the court's big conundrum at the moment. Now, we are the last stop. When people appeal their cases, they want a judgment in the highest court that is fully reasoned and carefully reasoned so that they understand why they've lost, especially the losers. The winners don't care much why they won, but the losers want to know. And so we have a hard task to do all of this and do proper judgments. Now that's a court with immense powers. Section 172 of the Constitution gives the court wide remedial powers where we find law or conduct unconstitutional. It talks about a just and equitable remedy. It's a very wide term, that. And then Section 38 of the Constitution enjoins us to give effective relief, which is just as wide. And so the court has, throughout its 30-year existence, by the way, the court is 30 years this year, and we had a big celebration around June or July, and we had a number of chief justices from all over the world here. And the court has and continues to grant wide-ranging relief in all spheres of the law. We've really changed life in South Africa. Muslim marriages are recognized. Partners are recognized as spouses. Life partners are recognized as spouses. We've legalized gay marriages. We've declared hate speech in a judgment that I wrote in Kwelani. Terrible things said about the LGBTI community. And it's also a court which has a case which I'll talk about later, which has imprisoned a former president, not because we liked it, but because we had to uphold the rule of law. And I'll talk about it later. And so we've got immense powers, but it's very important that we as judges, particularly in that court, remain cognizant of the limits of our powers. There is no power that is unbounded, not power exercised by the president or by a judge in the Constitutional Court or anybody. Power is bounded through the principle of legality and constrained by the Constitution itself. In a case, in a judgment which I gave in the Supreme Court of Appeal a few years ago, it's a case of Cathay Pacific Airways. It concerned contempt of court of the airline, Cathay Pacific Airways. I opened the judgment to say that judges wield immense powers, but those powers must be exercised with great circumspection and an abundance of caution. And I alluded in that case to the blindfolded Lady Justice that we all know, balancing the scales in the left hand and holding a sword in her right hand that personifies the moral force of justice. And so judges are only human beings. We are not superhuman beings. We are not computers. We are not machines. And we do make mistakes. And when we give judgment, we get criticized. I think it's very welcome, constructive criticism, but then you must know what you're talking about. You can't criticize judgments just for the sake of criticizing for ulterior motives, and you've never read the judgment. That's obvious. And judges must be careful to stay in their lanes. What do I mean by that? I've said earlier we can't rewrite budgets and we can't rewrite policy. Our Constitution calculatedly enshrines the doctrine of a separation of powers. What does it mean? It means that you can only exercise the power that the Constitution and the law under the Constitution gives you. So, the President and the Cabinet will make policy. The legislature will translate that policy into laws. And the judiciary is there to see that the law is consonant with the Constitution. We are the guardians of the Constitution, and the apex court, the Constitutional Court, is the ultimate guardian of the Constitution. We can't stray into the areas of trying to make laws ourselves. That's not what we are there for, or to make policy, as I've said. So, let me then talk about specific cases. I must say, to be a judge in the highest court in the land is an awesome, awesome honor. and a privilege, but it comes with immense responsibility. And this is my 25th year on the bench. I'm getting ready for retirement. And I've seen the best of people in those 25 years and the worst of people. I have seen people go out of court having seen that justice is done. But I've also regrettably seen many cases where justice wasn't done. I've tried as much as I can within the parameters of the law and the Constitution to make those two meet, law and justice. It may sound utopian, but you can rest assured that I can confidently say that I've tried. And I want to talk about cases where I think justice has not been done. When I say this, I'm bound by the majority decision of the court. That is how the court must work, because that's part of the rule of law. It's certainty. It means that if a judgment goes out of a majority of 5-4 or 6-5, that is the law. And I was outvoted in a Tubakale case. The case concerned people who had applied for houses in 1996 and they were granted subsidies on the East Rand in Ekurhuleni. So they got their subsidies. And yet, by the time the case came to us in 2023, they still hadn't had their houses. They'd been to 5 different courts, including ours. And by the time they got to us, they asked for constitutional damages as a last resort, because they tried everything: contempt of court, interdicts, declaratory orders. And I, in the minorities, said I would grant them constitutional damages. But I was outvoted by the majority. The majority sent them back to the High Court. And guess what? They're still stuck at the High Court. No houses, still stuck at the High Court. Now, I accept my colleagues' majority judgment, but it gives me some comfort that what I had said in that case, I'd read the main judgment, but they dissented, and the dissent carried the majority. I said in that case, I perused all the steps they'd taken in their long journey. And they'd gone to courts, High Court, Supreme Court of Appeal, back to High Court, Supreme Court of Appeal. It's like playing ping pong, back, forward, back. And then they came to the Constitutional Court and said, please stop this. And I was going to order the municipality to pay each one of them 10,000 Rand a month as constitutional damages, and to come back every 3 months or 6 months, we call that a supervisory interdict, to tell us, what have you done to give these people their houses? And if they haven't done anything, we increase the amount. What would that do? It would get the Auditor General to ask them at the end of every financial year, can you explain this wasteful expenditure? Because that's what it is. You're paying people damages for not doing what the Constitution demands of you. But as I say, I've been outvoted, and I must say that I get some comfort from the fact that many academics and commentators, even abroad, you heard that I was at Oxford last year and also the year before. People there, when they talk about my judgments, they talk about Tupakahale, and they say, you know, you were right. And they get me to try to explain the majority. I say, don't ask me, ask them. But as I say, that is the law. That is the law, the doctrine of precedent. We follow the majority judgment. So I'm going to talk quickly about a few cases, and I hope it brings you some sort of lighter relief than having to talk about these heavy legal principles. I'm going to start with a case in the Northern Cape, but I'm also going to talk about the Oscar Pistorius case, which I sat in, the Kwelani hate speech case. I'm not going to do that one because I've spoken about that one, the Zuma contempt of court case, and the Janus Valus case, the parole case. When I was a fairly young judge in the 2000s here in Kimberley, there came an urgent application. Now, urgent applications are urgent if the judge says it's urgent. Because people come to court and they want to jump the queue and they say, this is an urgent application. Year us before all these other people in the queue. It happens especially in the bigger divisions in Gauteng and the Western Cape and so on. But this one, I was on duty. Every week there's a judge on duty and you have to do all the urgent applications. So I was on duty. And I remember we were living in Royal Dean, and I got a call. That was the days before cell phone. I got a call on my home phone number. And they said, Judge, there's an urgent application. They came to my house and I said, no, let's go to the court. There was a doctor from Kimberley Hospital who came in his own capacity as a doctor to bring this urgent application. It was so urgent, normally they would file affidavits, and then the other side would get an opportunity to file what we call answering affidavits. But it was so urgent that he came and he said, I must give oral evidence. And I got my secretary to come into the office. It was in the early evening, and to take notes. And I had the lawyers come to my office. But the respondents, the people on the other side, didn't come. And this was what the case was all about. This doctor said, he took the oath. I swore him in and he gave evidence in my office. He said he's treating a young child. I think the child was 4 or 5 years old. And the child needs blood that very evening. I think Dr. Bavasa, my good friend, is here. He'll understand that. The child needs blood this evening or the child won't see the light of day tomorrow. But the parents were Jehovah's Witnesses. Now their religion is opposed to blood transfusions. Now let me immediately say I have great respect for that religion. I must, because the man whose name I bear, Opafan Majiedt, I'm Stephen, I'm the English version of Stephanus. He was a Jehovah's Witness. He's a man I admire greatly because I carry his name also. And my aunt, my late aunt, my father's eldest sister, Aunt Cecilia, we just called her Auntie Cookie. You know how it goes in the township, Auntie Cookie. She was a Jehovah's Witness. And I had great respect for the religion. But it wasn't about the religion. You see, I must explain to you as non-lawyers that in every division of the High Court, every province has a division. The High Court in that province is the upper guardian of all minor children, all children under 18. So it means in simple language, it means that we can overrule parents if it is in the interest of the child. So here's this case. The child needs blood, but the parents, for religious reasons, are refusing a blood transfusion. It's a matter literally of life and death. And here I am, a young judge. So what I did is I got the number for the parents from the doctor. I phoned them. And the father of the child answered and he said, speak to my wife. And I did. And she was vehement. She said, we will not agree to blood transfusion for this child. And I said to her, the doctor says to me under oath, and I have no reason to disbelieve him, that if your child doesn't get blood, he will die tonight. And she said to me, you do what you want to do, we refuse, but God will deal with you. Do you understand the kind of pressure that you have as a young judge? It's a matter of life and death. And of course, I gave the order. The blood transfusion was done. And as far as I know, the child did survive. But just gives you an insight into what we face as judges. The second case I want to talk to about is the Oscar Pistorius case. You know, it's a case that got everybody glued to their TV sets. I must tell you, and don't quote me. If you quote me, I'll deny. It's your word against mine. If I was the judge in that case, I would have refused that application because suddenly the courtroom became a theater. And everybody was like, you know, I'm on TV, you know. And I am told that some people took leave from work to watch every minute of that live feed. And even I became a celebrity of that case. I don't know if my wife will remember, we used to live in Cape Town, and there was a Virgin Active gym close to us in N1 City, and we went there. I do gym, you can look at me, but that was way back then in 2014. So as I'm coming down the stairs from my facade of cycling, somebody stops me and says, I know you, aren't you Judge Majiedt? I said, yes. He says, I saw you on TV with Oscar Pistorius. And I didn't feel good, I actually felt embarrassed. But that is also the case that made everybody become a lawyer immediately in South Africa. And they would watch Barry Roo put these things, and people got to know about Milady, and I put it to you. And then everywhere you would go, you know, we would play golf, and in golf, it works the other way. The lower the score, the better you'd played. So if you made a 4, you're better than the guy who made 6. I'm just explaining that. So the guy, you would play with a guy, and he'd say, you know, no, I made a 4 there. And then the other guy would say, I put it to you that you made a 6. Or the husband and wife would leave in the morning, and the wife would come back home in the afternoon and say, you know, when I wanted to have my cereal, there was no milk left. And the husband would say, I put it to you that when I left, there was still milk left. And actually, in all seriousness, it was a very simple case. You don't have to be a lawyer. There's a man and a woman in the house. The man shoots the woman, kills her. The man must come and explain what happened. The court must decide, is it reasonably possibly true? Now, if you look at the photos and you look at the room and you consider the fact that she had a phone with her and that she was trying desperately to phone out, and so on. The story actually about black, note black intruders didn't make sense, and that was properly rejected. But of course, before us, it was only whether it was dolus eventualis, murder or negligence, and we found it was dolus eventualis. And suddenly everybody also understood dolus eventualis much better. I want to talk about another case. It's a case that you wouldn't know much about, if anything. But it's the biggest ever rail crossing collision in the history of South Africa. It happened in 2006. The case only got to us in Bloemfontein. I was still in the Supreme Court of Appeal in 2014. It's a case known as Jacobs versus Transnet Limited Trading as Metro Rail. So it's a Metro Rail case. So it happened in Firgrove. Those of you who know the Western Cape will know it's just outside Somerset West as you travel to Kuils River. And there was a rail crossing there. And these poor people, and they were really poor people, they were those seasonal laborers who would come from all over the country to come to the Western Cape to come and pick grapes, because now it's grape season, right? And then after picking the grapes, they would go back, but they would make some good money for them, because unemployment was rife where they came from. So they were they came there, and these labor brokers, you know, they organized for the farmers, the laborers, and they were in charge of it. And these people, there were 20 odd of them on the back of, you know, these Hyundai bakkies. 20 odd of them on the back of the bakkie, new driver, and the labor broker's son was on the left, showing him where the farm is that these people must go. And so the labor broker's son was busy with a clipboard doing some things, but as they approached the railway crossing, he said to the driver, who's new to the route, he said, now you must be aware there's a railway crossing in front, just take it easy. And his evidence, he was flung out of the vehicle, or he jumped out, and he gave evidence. His evidence was, after he'd spoken, he continued on the clipboard. When he looked up, he saw that the Hyundai truck had stalled on the railway line and there was a train approaching. And he jumped out. Now, friends, it's very sad, but there were 19 people killed in that collision, including the driver. And the two plaintiffs who brought a test case, Ms. Jacobs and Ms. Hendricks, testified in that case. So they agreed. If these two ladies win the case, then Transnet will settle. Conversely, if they lose, the ladies, the plaintiffs, then Transnet won't pay them anything. So it was a very important case. And so in the Western Cape High Court, the High Court found for Transnet, found that the driver was negligent in stalling the vehicle. And then it came to us on appeal, and I wrote the judgment. It was a unanimous judgment. And the facts were these. As the train approached, the driver, who was a lady called Miss Mkalisa, she was driving the train. And the speed limit on that line is 90 kilometers per hour. That was an unguarded railway line. It wasn't a boom, no traffic lights. It was just a warning and then a stop sign. And the train was coming, and she said, in the evidence, she saw this truck stuck on the railway line. Now the driver, when the driver drives the train, this is evidence I heard there, the driver's got to keep her or his hands on the steering mechanism. When the driver leaves that steering mechanism, the train's system kicks in after 5 seconds into what is called the dead man's brake. It's very patriarchal. Let's call it the dead person's brake. Why it is called that, you can imagine if the driver must get a heart attack and the driver drops dead or is indisposed and she leaves those levers, then the train must be able to stop. But there's also an emergency brake. Emergency brake kicks in immediately. Now that 5 seconds makes a huge, huge difference. So what had happened, Mr. Mkalisa, I would have done the same. Please. When she saw this truck on the railway line, she left the levers and she ran to the back from the locomotive to one of the compartments to save herself. Who wouldn't do that? And so the train ran along at 90 km per hour. There are 2 whistle boards. She blew the whistle as she had to do. She doesn't have to slow down. The train is running at 90 km per hour. She leaves the levers, run back, and after 5 seconds, the train starts braking. But of course, by the time it hit this bakkie, it was like still going like great guns. That 5 seconds would have made some difference. Some people may have survived, but that became an important point in the case. And so it slammed into this bakkie. It cut the bakkie in half, the truck in half, And as they did aerial photographs, you could see just bodies marked, body A, body B, body C. Those are people lying there, 19 of them. And so we looked at this case, and I'm going to cut it short and say that we found unanimously, all 5 judges in that court, we found Transnet liable not on the basis, and I'm emphasizing this because I'm coming back to Sol Plaatje's values, remember. We found on the basis not of Ms. Mkalisa's negligence, because remember, if she's negligent, the company is held liable because she's acting, as we say as lawyers, in the course and scope of her employment. You know, if Dr. Siedras does something bad, he called me Brutus, and what must I say, et tu, Brute? You know, to be called Brutus is bad, you know what those guys did. So if Dr. Siedras should do something low, and God forbid, in the course and scope of his job, yes, Sol Plaatje University is held liable as long as he's acting while he's on duty. And so we could have held Transnet liable on the basis of Ms. Mkalisa's negligence. But what would that do to her as a person? I ask you to think as judges in that situation. We would destroy her career, and we would be grossly unfair. As I said earlier, I would have done the same. I don't know about you, but I would have ran back for self-preservation. So what we found is we found that Transnet should have had that crossing properly guarded with a boom and a light, and that speed limit shouldn't have been 90, should have been 40, because if you look at the photos, there's a big bend, and then you can't see, with the foliage there, you can't see the train coming. And so we held them liable on that basis. Now, I'm saying this, I'm giving you this case to illustrate what kind of choices we have as judges, to make people's lives or to ruin them, people like Ms. Mkalisa. That's the one case I want to talk about. Let me talk quickly about the Zuma and Walu's cases together. The Zuma case became notorious because we jailed him for 15 months because he didn't go to the commission when he had a subpoena to go. Now, if I get a subpoena, I can't say, this is the last thing a judge should say, by the way, do you know who I am? That subpoena doesn't listen to you know who I am. We know what happened to a judge who said, do you know who I am? Who could have sorted out the matter there and then, having knocked down the wall and talked to the man nicely and say, I'll be back tomorrow. But went from bad to worse, said, do you know who I am? And racial epithets were slung around there, and then he perjured himself in court afterwards in the criminal case. And we know what happened to him. Sadly, good man, Nokola Mtata, good man, but he acted wrongly there. Never say, do you know who I am? So if I get a subpoena, or the president of the country gets a subpoena, of the people, or the people who guard this building, or the people who clean the streets for us get a subpoena, we are all bound by the law. We must go to honor that subpoena. If not, you're in contempt. And so we imposed that sentence after long, cautious deliberation. And we, out of some quarters, it was said that we instigated the riots in KZN. Well, I'm subjective, but I beg to differ. I think that is the light that lit the powder keg of people's discontentment and of some people's criminality. But that wasn't what caused the riots. And the Walu's case is a different case. Now look at this paradox. You have a man who fought the liberation struggle, who led MK, not the MK of today, the real Umkhonto we Sizwe, who led Umkhonto we Sizwe in exile, who came home as a liberation hero, who became president of the country for better or for worse, like marriage, but he was the president of the country, and we sent him to jail. Now people contrast these cases, and they say, here's a man, a callous, calculated, cold-blooded, racist assassin, who almost drove our country into civil war. If it hadn't been for President Nelson Mandela, this country would have burnt when he shot Chris Hani. Now, I had the privilege of meeting Chris Hani twice in Cape Town when we lived there. What a wonderful man, a strong leader, a humble man, and a man I think would have become president of this country. And then Janus Walu takes him out, just because he's a racist and a right-wing extremist. And then this case comes to us, and we unanimously grant him parole. Now remember I said we not make policy. Now we don't grant parole, but there are exceptions. This man had been to court probably 6 or 7 times. The minister had refused him parole 4 or 5 times. And when you read Chief Justice, then Chief Justice Zondo's judgment, he only deals with the law. He talks about the Correctional Service Act that was applicable at the time, the 1959 Act, and he talks about the present Act, the 1993 Act. And he demonstrates in that judgment purely on the law why this man was eligible for parole 13 years after he was incarcerated. By then he'd been in prison for 27 years. So what do? We have a man here who almost drove our country into civil war. A man who killed one of our real liberation heroes. What do? We apply the Constitution and the law, even for him. Because even he is entitled to what that Constitution, the rights that that Constitution grants us. Now people contrast these cases and they say, well, you send the President Zuma to jail and you release this right-wing extremist. That, ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, is the Constitution and the law. That's all we did. I encourage you, if you have time, go and read that judgment. And Chief Justice Zondo took it upon himself to write that judgment. And he put a paragraph in there to say how callous this was, how it drove us almost into civil war. But he explained why even this man is entitled to the rights in the Constitution. And that's the rule of law. That's what the rule of law means. And afterwards, I saw on TV later that evening when I got home, Mrs. Dimpo Hani, Mr. Hani's widow, giving a terrible interview, heartfelt, cursing us and saying that God will deal with us within 2 years. Thank God I'm still here. But you know, I don't feel an iota of bitterness about what she said. This is her husband. This is the father of her children. If I was her, I would have said the same. Maybe not in such harsh terms, but it came from her heart. That's how she felt. I can understand that. And that's how we have to live with as judges, my dear friends. And so why do I relate these cases? I want to then conclude by saying this. Judges have a very hard job to do, especially in the highest court. People can appeal, but when it comes to you, you're the last stop. Fortunately, there's 11 of us, so we debate and we deliberate and we sometimes fight, not physically, with each other. So judges are required to be faithful to their oath, to uphold the Constitution and the law. That is no walk in the park, and I promise you, it's an agonizing thing to do. From that child in the Jehovah's Witness case to these two cases, the Zuma and Wallace cases. Unfortunately, in court cases, there must always be a loser. You don't hear of a court case that got drawn, 1-1 or 2-2, like soccer or football. So there'll always be an unhappy one, a litigant. So we do incredibly hard work and we carry the weight. You feel it personally. I want to conclude just by saying this. I've strived throughout my judicial career, and I hope my life too, to stay away from vanity, conceit, and self-exaltation. The scriptures teach us in many passages that what matters is not self-exaltation by others like ourselves, but by God, by our Creator. I've tried hard. I've tried to treat litigants and people in my courts and otherwise outside with humility and civility. You and others here in the room and outside the room, you'll be the judges whether I've been able to do that. We as judges must remain humble servants of the people like Saul Plaatje. If we don't, then we are tarnishing that magnificent legacy. We live in a country now with serious challenges, and yet I remain optimistic. Why? Because there are many, many millions of people in this country with that selfless spirit of a Saul Plaatje. And so we must remember that when we dispense justice, we must do so equally to the rich and the poor, the mighty and the meek, and the raucous and the voiceless. When I travel abroad officially, which I've been fortunate to do quite often, I hear all the time about people saying what a wonderful constitution we have and what a wonderful judiciary we have. Now, there are problems, there are challenges. People feel that the Constitution is not meeting their expectations. And I was at University of the Western Cape last Monday where I gave lectures to postgraduates and students in environmental law, and then later to undergraduates, packed class, big class, on on the enforcement of socioeconomic rights. That's rights like the right to education, the right to housing, and so on. And our young people are impatient. They say, why can't the courts do more? I explained to them, to Bakale, we can't give them houses. They say, why not? And I say, because it's not our job, it's the job of the executive. They say, but the executive is not doing their job. You see our conundrum. It's a real conundrum. We can't do that. I want to say that we as judges should strive to emulate the great Saul Plaatje. And if we do so in even only the most modest of ways, we will become true selfless servants of the people, ensuring that justice is done and that we remain true guardians of our supreme law, the Constitution. Now, I want to end off on a lighter note by saying, you know why I'll never say, do you know why I'm going to tell people that I'm a judge? Years ago, we were playing golf in Katu, lovely golf course. And the guys coming up the other side were waiting to play. They were waiting for the green to clear. And I had to play my shot. We were going down this way. And I didn't know about the conversation. I heard about it afterwards. And the guy who was on the other side knew me, and the other one didn't. He said, you see that guy playing there? He's a judge. And just as he said that, I hit the ball, and I lifted up my head, and I skinned the ball, and the ball rolled like 2 paces. And the other guy who didn't know me said, when he heard I was a judge, he said, well, he's misjudged that shot very bad. Thank you.
I think Justice Majiedt really deserves a standing ovation. Thank you very much. I almost wanted to sound like a Kimberlite now. I almost said, yo. Yeah. Thank you so much, Justice. Thank you so much for the lessons, the experiences that you have shared with us. Thank you very much. Now it's time for Q&A. We've got roaming mics. I think we've got one here in front. And then we've got mics that are moving from left to right and from right to left. I see a lot of hands. So I'm going to start in front, and then I'm going to go that way. It's only logical. I'm going to start with Mr. Tebe Ikalafeng. I note you, sir. The mic will come to you. Mr. Joaile, I note you as well. And I note the colleagues here on my left. Yeah. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. First I must say, I was born and raised in Kimberley, the real capital. No offense to the justice. But I want to say, what a fabulous lecture. Thank you so much, Justice Majiedt. It was excellent. In your 10-year tenure, as you leave us, and you look at your judicial experience as well, what's the one thing you want to leave us with that intersects with Saul Plaatje's legacy?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Kalafeng. You know, I already said that this university is firmly grounded with the 2 VCs that have been here, because look, I'm a ceremonial post, as you know, and the VC designate. It's built on firm ground, and I believe that the values that we must aspire to is to be the light of Africa, like Saul Plaatje, like this banner says. And we can do that if we remain humble, hardworking, and honest. That's all we need to do, and do the basics right. And I will say more tonight at the dinner when I say goodbye to Saul Plaatje. But I think if we do that, we will be able to honor the legacy of this great man. And excuse me if I go to religion, but if you don't mind, it's like being called a Christian, which means a child of Christ. Mm-hmm. And you call Saul Plaatje University, and then you don't live up to that legacy. You understand what I'm saying? So we've got to aspire to that, and I'm sure we can do it. We've got an excellent council, which you also serve on, an excellent senior management, excellent staff. And I think this place, and even the SRC, I've interacted with them, former and now. Excellent, we're on the right track. Thank you for that question.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Justice. My parents named me Khatlisho Manake, and I'm a child of Khalishiwe and an alumni of William Prescott Senior Secondary. Justice, thank you very much for the lecture. I think it has really opened up my eyes and my mind on the life of a judge, of a justice. It gave us much more perspective on the daily operations of what transpires in case. Sometimes, as a layman, we would just commentate, whether on X, whether on Facebook, or even on WhatsApp, and not really knowing the ins and outs of what entails to be a judge, what it entails to be a justice. But thank you very much, like I've said, for the presentation. My first question goes around the relevance of Saul Plaatje's teachings today. I ponder on what aspects of Saul Plaatje's legacy do you believe are most relevant for today's generation of legal professionals, and most importantly, public servants? And then secondly, just a personal reflection on your career lessons. Looking back at your judicial journey, what is one profound lesson you learned that you believe Saul Plaatje himself would have appreciated or endorsed?
Thank you. On the first one, you know, there's a slogan in the civil servants, Batu Pile, people first.
Yeah.
As people in all spheres of life, civil servants, as educationalists, lawyers, everybody, we must live it. And he did it. He didn't just preach it, he lived it. Like I said to you, when they offered him the leadership of the SANNC, he turned it down because he had work to do to fight against this Land Act, which is still dragging us down today. And so that is the one lesson. We must live the legacy of Saul Plaatje by being doers and not just talkers. And my own judicial career, you know, I must be honest with you. I didn't in my early career know much about Saul Plaatje. And I got to know him later as I got involved in this university, and this municipality became known as Saul Plaatje. And then I started learning about this man. And the one thing that I regret is that I didn't learn it earlier, perhaps as a student. Look, in the student days, we learned about greats that had gone before us, but not about Saul Plaatje. Like I said earlier, unfortunately, it's only now, the last 10, 20 years, through people like Sabata Mackay and Brian Willen and others, that is coming to the forefront of our history. He deserves a much better place in our history than he's had all these years. And so I regret not getting to know about his life earlier and infusing my own career as an advocate, because I used to do a lot of these political cases, but also as a judge of Saul Plaatje. That's my one regret. But the one thing that I'll take to heart from him is that thing of humility and service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Let me also take this opportunity to thank you, Justice Majiedt, for delivering such a beautiful lecture. And just to get straight to my point, by the way, I've got a brother who recently got admitted as an attorney in Mafikeng High Court, and he looks greatly up to you. I normally say that he's your biggest fan.
I know who you are, but just tell the others who you are.
Also, I'm Tiro Choile, the president of Convocation of Saul Plaatje University. Yes, thanks, Judge. So, seeing that Solomon Plaatje was a man of great ethics and integrity, I just want to get to the case of Tobakale. Like, it sparked so many questions regarding integrity, of course. And I think you did express that you were actually outvoted in that case, to say that you had agreed, but then there were those who had a dissenting view. So there is this growing narrative in the country that the judiciary could be or potentially captured. So I just wanted to find out from you, Justice, based on that fact, that what is your view on that? Thank you.
Can I just say before I answer the question that this is one of the young leaders of Saul Plaatje. There are many others here who I greatly admire. Thank you for the work you are doing, and carry on with it. I will leave that answer to Justice Madlanga, my brother in the law. He's doing a full commission to answer that very question. I'm not going to answer the question because I'm biased. I'm a judge in my own course if I answer that question, because you know what the answer is going to be. But we've got a program now at the court that Edwin Cameron used to do. By the way, I was going to say it in my speech, that I'm the third judge in a row. I think somebody got the sequence wrong. The sequence was 2022, where are we now? 2023, Edwin Cameron was here. He's a former Constitutional Court Justice. Last year, Albie Sachs was here, former Constitutional Court Justice. I'm the third one in a row. Don't invite another Constitutional Court Justice next time. Before you know it, they will take over the place. So Edwin had a program that he ran for young black kids from the township. He would go out to the township with his law clerks. We've got law clerks that help us. And he would go and talk about the Constitution and constitutionalism and so on. I picked that up last year with my former and present law clerks, and we're doing that now in a different way. We got funding, so we bring kids from different township schools, high schools. We bring them to the court, give them breakfast and lunch. We show them the court precinct, because that's a court with a huge history, because that was a prison where Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and others were kept, and a women's jail where Winnie Mandela and others were kept, imprisoned. Now, we show them that, and then they come to the courtroom, and a judge, usually myself or one of my colleagues who are available, would talk to them about being a judge, the Constitution and constitutionalism, and then they go to the auditorium where the law clerks teach them about certain specific aspects of the Constitution. Then there's a Q&A like here, and they ask heavy questions about the Constitution, not delivering like I told you. But 2 sessions ago, one youngster put up his hand and said, "Is it true that you judges are corrupt?" So there you have it. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to be fair to the other side. May I request that we take questions from this side as well? Otherwise, the scale of justice is going to be skewed.
Dumelang, ke o bakeng Jacobs. I'm a student, master's student in sociology. Ke modula stilo wa banna ba jang camp. And also I'm an aspirant principal and vice chancellor of this institution. So the future belongs to us.
Yeah.
So we must claim it now. Thank you very much, Justice, to an insightful lecture. I have 2 questions. The first question is on Janus Walus, very contentious issues. My question is, having taken, I know that we have explained the Constitution at length and its expectations, but now, coming from the history we are coming from, even where we are, how do we balance justice, reconciliation, and accountability in the context of Jalus Walus case? And lastly, now, this question is related to the institution that I am aspiring to head. It's this booklet that I'm holding. It's a booklet that I think it's available to every first years. Yes, and every staff has it. So on the forward by our esteemed former Vice Chancellor, Professor Balim, he talks about, I just want to read this line. In the conceptualization of this institution, he says that one question that they had to look into is the reimagining or even revisioning the social responsibility of this institution. Then this is in the context of the apartheid that we come from. The question that arises from this line, it's how do we reimagine, even re-envision the social purpose, having spent so much time as a chancellor of this institution? How do we reimagine and re-envision the social purpose of this institution in the 21st century, in the Northern Cape, by the way, not in Gauteng, not in Cape Town, in the Northern Cape? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I tell the youngsters who come to the court, I tell them that we've got for the first time the first female Chief Justice in the history of the country. And I tell them, especially the young women, one of you here may very well be the next Chief Justice of the country. So thank you for aspiring, because now beyond the sky is the limit. With us and apartheid, we were limited. Can I just say, in the Valu's case, you see, when we give a judgment on the law, we're not giving a judgment. Yes, Valu's case is before us. But when we apply that law, we must be able to apply it to a liberation fighter who is in prison, who applies for parole. It must apply to a common criminal who applies for parole. It must apply to a swindler who swindled people out of millions who apply for parole. That's the law, you understand. It's a very hard thing to do. You know, from a subjective point of view, you sit there and you say, can we really let this man out? And it is a very hard thing to do, but you've got to do it. And afterwards, people blamed us. But you must remember one thing, Mr. Jacobs, I forgot your first name. We didn't write the Constitution. The politicians did. We didn't write the Correction Services Act of 1959. The old apartheid regime wrote it. The 1993 Act, the new government wrote it. We didn't write it. We got to apply it. And so if you want to have change in parole, you must look at the legislation. We can't change it. Parliament must change it. To the second question, you know, it's very important that SPU remembers where it is located, the Northern Cape. I always say to people, they call us the Cinderella province. You know, years ago when I worked, you heard briefly, I worked as Chief State Law Advisor here for the province. Premier Mane de Picho was the Premier. And he was friends with the Premier from Northwest at the time, what is it, Popo Molefe.
Popo.
Now they would come and visit. Popo would come here, or Mane would go there, and sometimes I would travel with or not. And then Popo Molefe would come here and would say, this province of yours, man. Remember, the Northwest is small. He said, this province of yours, man. There's more animals than people here, man. It's a unique province. It's a province that has been for many, many decades under apartheid, even in the new government, have been neglected, grossly neglected. And so Sol Plaatje has got a unique position, this university, of making a difference, of bringing through students who will understand that you can't just get your B degree or your honors or your masters and then flee to the bright lights of Gauteng or Cape Town. We must put back here. That is why when I was approached to become Chancellor of this university, I said yes. That is why when long after I'd left Kimberley when I was at the Supreme Court of Appeal, I was the one, and my colleagues are here, they'll tell you, I was the one in 2009 who started the alumni trust of our old, you're a William Prescott man, eh? No, the other one. Of the William Prescott Trust, because we've got to put back. If we don't put back and look after our own province, who's going to do it? Not the people in Gauteng or in Western Cape or in KZN. They're going to gloat about their own successes. And let me tell you something, when Mane de Picho was the Premier of this province, it had clean audits, all the departments, every year. It had the top matric of the entire country. He was the one who introduced the topic of parliament or legislature meets the people. And then they started copying him, even at national level. We used to travel out with him. He would listen there. He would make notes. He would take his officials with him. He said, Majiedt, you, Mayor, you, Cedras, you heard what they said. Next week, there must be an answer. And we did. We answered those people, even if it was just to say, we're working on it. But now somebody there in wherever, in Amakwaland knows, hey, the people in Kimberley, they know about my problem, they're working on it. That's what Batu Pele means. Not talk, you know. So we got to get that kind of paradigm back where we serve the people, not ourselves. You know what's happening in the country today. So you as the future generation, as the future Vice Chancellor of this place, must ensure that we change this, that we have this paradigm shift back to what Sol Plaatje taught us. People first and me second. Thank you.
Okay. So, two more questions from this side. Two more questions from this side, and we go back to the other side. We've got 14 minutes left.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Ke Karabo Mangekia, motlhatlheledi wa Setswana mo Sol Plaatje University. Thank you, Justice Majiedt, for rendering a great lecture. Mine is more of a question. How can we intellectualize Sol Plaatje's work, particularly around the issue of scholarship? I appreciate that we host this annual lecture on annual basis. However, I am of a view that it is not enough for us to intellectualize this giant's work, particularly as scholars. As an emerging scholar and as an ambitious scholar, I anticipate to see myself maybe supervising postgraduate studies on the scholarship, particularly around Sol Plaatje. So, in terms of curriculum transformation, how can we transform to that point? And then when you look at the scholars who are on Sol Plaatje's work, there are only three. I only know Sabata Mokai, Brian William, and Professor Majiedt. So how do we motivate the emerging scholars towards a scholarship? Saha Solomon Sol Plaatje. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. It's very important. You see, there's a rich, fertile ground that lies in literature and philosophy and in politics that you can expand that intellectual pursuit of Sol Plaatje's life. Now you see that man sitting there. His mother was one of the first justices of the Constitutional Court, Justice Mokgoro, a child from here. You know, St. Boniface, Kgaleshue. Now they're starting a foundation in her name. And they're going to bring lectures in collaboration with this university. They are going to do a lot of work. And that's the kind of thing you've got to feed in with Sol Plaatje's life. Because we need to further the work of Sol Plaatje in relation to the Northern Cape. And that's the way to do it. So why don't you start looking at writing more about Sol Plaatje? There's much more to be said. There are many areas of his life which remain unwritten. He trips abroad. You know, there are very few people who know that he tried to get back into politics, but he couldn't. Why don't you do an in-depth study of why not? You know, those things. There are a lot of unwritten things about him. And we got a lot of catch-up to do. I told you that only recently his name came up there with the Walter Sisulus and the Nelson Mandelas and the Govan Mbekis and the Kathradas and so on. Let's get his name up there. It's up to you through scholarly analysis and thesis about the life of Sol Plaatje. As I say, there's a lot of fertile ground. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question from this side. I saw a hand on this side. I don't want to disadvantage this side as well.
Greetings to everyone. Justice, greeting. I'm a student of life. My name is Onolo Theo Janki. I have 3 questions, and they all speak really to one thing, Justice. The first question is, how do we move away from the precedent set in Grootboom without really tangling on the Constitution? That is the first question. And also the second question is, why the majority in Grootboom was wrong, Justice Majiedt? And the third question is, why the minority judgment in Tubakale is important for South African jurisprudence. And the last question, which was not part of the first 3, is when are we having a law faculty at this university? Thank you.
The last one I can't answer. Look, Grootboom, if you read Tubakale, I say in Grootboom, in Tubakale, when I read, that was the main judgment, but I was the minority, because the case was allocated to me to write from the beginning. So I said there, we'd moved far beyond Grootboom. Remember, Grootboom was just giving the first tentative steps on what does it mean to have the right to housing progressively realized. Progressively means over time and within reasonable means, as this new government finds its feet and try to undo the ravages of apartheid and so on. It wasn't a sprint, it was a marathon. And I said, but we've come down the line, we're way past Grootboom. And that is why I say you can't apply Grootboom anymore. You must now give them real relief, constitutional damages. You say the majority in Grootboom is wrong. I don't know why you say that, because I disagree with that. You must explain why. So I can't answer a question that I don't know why you say it's wrong. The minority in Tubakale, and here I'm being subjective. You know, as I say to you, I went to Oxford in 2023 and 24. And it was mostly master students in international human rights law, constitutional law, and so on. And they all know Tubakale. And they all talk about the fact that Tubakale is exactly what it means to say, you had Grootboom in what year was it, 2001? Now in 2023, what progressive realization has there been of this right to housing by government, who must implement, right? And what reasonable means have they applied? And I said, these people were given subsidies in 1996 because of corruption or maladministration. They still don't have houses. They lived in appalling conditions. So I said there must be progressive realization, and that is why I granted them the relief in the minority. The majority felt, you see, our court is in a sense conservative because it's the highest court. It doesn't often grant constitutional damages. It's only done so twice, in the case called Forse, as Minister of Security, and the case of all the squatters, the Modderklip squatters. We had like 40,000 people squatting on a man's land, and the government couldn't move them, or didn't want to, or a bit of both. And they got constitutional damages from the court. So they were reluctant to take that extra step. I subjectively and personally believe they're wrong, and as I say, many lawyers and commentators agree with that. It's unfortunate, but I must say in the case of Commando, you may know that we gave a great step forward because we said when you give people emergency housing, people who have lost their housing, it's there in Woodstock in Cape Town, people who are tenants there for generations. Now people come in, they're gentrifying. Woodstock was one of the lesser suburbs in Cape Town. Now it's becoming upmarket. So what happens? The rich move in, the poor gets chucked out. And in that case of Commando, we said, when you give them emergency housing because a developer had bought the land where they are tenants of those houses, you must give them emergency housing, not 40 Ks outside Cape Town like they wanted to. They work and they live there, the children go to school there. You must give them in that vicinity, because you see the problem in Cape Town is there's spatial apartheid. Spatial apartheid, spatial injustice, which must be remedied. And there's a tug of war there. There's another case, the Tafelberg High School land, prime land in Sea Point. We're still writing that judgment. I won't tell you what's happening because I'll get charged. But I said in Tubakale we must move. And unfortunately, we could have moved there. It's an opportunity missed.
Thank you. One last question from the side.
Okay. Hello, my name is Pinky Mkhalanyane. I'm the outgoing chairperson of Northern Cape Women in Tourism. Our association is basically a voice for women who have tourism products, your hotels, your guest house, your restaurants owned by women. And we've been in existence since 2020. And unfortunately or fortunately for us, the only active association or group is in Solplaatje, Solplaatje municipal boundaries. Judge, I'm glad because on Monday I'm having a very serious matter. You know, when you deal with 36 women under your umbrella and you need to make judgment on such certain things because of certain complaints and everything, that I'm glad that you said at times decision you make makes you unpopular amongst people, but later on they'll start seeing the fruits. The issue of the child that you just spoke about, which has to, where you have to decide about the blood transfusion. So I'm also in that kind of dilemma. So I literally have an idea of how I'm going to deal with it on Monday. Thanks for being here and thanks for the lecture. As one of our programs, whenever we have bulk accommodation, we take a tourist or our guest to the Solplaatje Museum just to give them a feel and understanding, and also bring them here because it's not far from each other. The only thing that is far of Solplaatje is the grave, but the municipality statute, the university and the house, it's a walking distance from each other. So as part of his legacy, and as part of a beneficiation program from women in tourism, we are working together with the university in making sure that tourists have an understanding of the legacy of such a giant Sol Plaatje. We also explain the legacy of Sol Plaatje when it comes to issues related to our own heritage. Last week at Nare Boutique, we were with Kashin and some of the lecturers from, I think, is it humanitarian? Yes, humanity section, where we were hosted by the National Conference Bureau, which actually is a company that says that we want to bring events to Kimberley, but we want Kimberley to be packaged as Sol Plaatje. So we are working hand in hand, and we are glad, Judge, that as you are living, at least your name will also have footprint, because justice, when it comes to tourism and economic development, especially for women, has been realized during your time in partnership with Sol Plaatje. That was just a comment, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen.
Good luck with your programs, ma'am. All the best.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. Our time is very, very pregnant. So I'm going to take just one question from this side, and that's it. One question from this side. Yeah. Now, Judge, how do I do it? There are 4 people. How do I apply justice? Let me give someone from the Sol Plaatje family to say something.
Can I just, before you ask your question, apologize for not recognizing you right in the beginning. You are the most important, the Sol Plaatje family. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Judge. Good
It's
evening,
when I was called Brutus, you know.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Spencer. Khopolang Daniel Plaatje. I'm a 5th generation descendant of Sol Plaatje. I serve within the trust as an errand boy and somebody who ruffles feathers or something to that extent. Judge, it's indeed an honor and a privilege to stand here in front of everybody and say bravo. What you have just delivered gives a very enlightening and very delightful angle in terms of what Sol Plaatje was and what he stood for. More especially on the element of his selflessness. I think we need to go maybe a little bit deep in terms of his selflessness. Like you mentioned, the element of that he was awarded presidency. He's the only person, actually, unbroken record. He was awarded presidency. Actually, he was nominated in absentia while he was on foreign envoy. He was elected in absentia. And when he came back from the foreign envoys, after engaging the likes of Marcus Garvey, W.B. Du Bois, and the likes, and was awarded ANC presidency, which was by then South African Native National Congress. He said, much as I'm humbled by this gesture, let this challenge be handed over to somebody who would be fully committed to the cause. My mindset and my whole being is more inclined to being a civil rights activist. Hence, the inscription on his grave is, rest in peace, or rather in Sichuana, rest in peace, servant of his people. Thank you. Greatly humbled, Judge Majiedt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, I would like to thank everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you to the panelists as well. Thank you, Judge. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. You know, in Kimberley at funerals, if you don't invite someone back to the home for food, they feel so offended. We have food, finger dinner on the other side. Please indulge yourself, and thank you so much. Thank you. Is there? Ooh. I'm so sorry, Keshni. You can somehow do the invite for the food. Please come.
I can do much, but I can't see over the podium. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To our special guests, our esteemed speakers, and our fellow attendees. We appreciate your continued support of this annual event, which showcases the university's commitment to academic excellence and community engagement. To our Chancellor, thank you for sharing your expertise and insights on the lessons you have learned during your distinguished career. You have enriched our understanding and inspired new thinking about the life and legacy of Saul Plaatje, for whom we are proudly named. A special thank you to Percy Oliphant, who has worked tirelessly to ensure that this event is a success. And a thank you to my team in the Institutional Advancement Office, who are always ready to lend a hand. I also want to acknowledge our colleagues in AV, cleaning, property, security, and the maintenance, who are the backbone of everything we do at SPU. Thank you for your efforts. As we conclude this year's lecture, we take with us new ideas and renewed inspiration. May the conversations and connections made here today continue to inspire us as we strive to be the light from Africa for humanity. We look forward to meeting you again next year. I thank you. Ladies and gentlemen.